seemed like when you interview a lady from Texas, you need to have a cowboy hat. Now, this has to win the award as being the ugliest cowboy hat ever created. I said to my wife, "Where did this thing come from?" And she said, "I don't know. Someone probably was trying to get rid of it and dumped it on me." So that's probably what happened. Welcome, all of you. It's an honor today to be back with you. We're going to be on Mondays now, 5:30 instead of Tuesdays. The reason is Twinkle Toes Weiner has to improve on her tap dancing skills. And I understand Brian is tapping through life also, my goodness. So we'll be on Mondays, and we'll talk to you about next Monday when we get done. But it's an honor to have Kathy Portie with us today. Most of you probably have seen Kathy or seen her name on the Grizzly, but I'm pretty sure most of you don't know a lot about this lady, and we hope after the next half an hour or so, you'll have some insight into this wonderful lady and what she does for our community. So Kathy, welcome. Glad you could be with us tonight.
I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. So let's back up, and we've alluded to your background in Texas. Let's go back and start there. Tell us a little bit about your family, maybe your high school experiences in Port Arthur, Texas. Can we start there, please?
Sure, absolutely. Well, you know, Port Arthur's a little town. It's much bigger than Big Bear. It's about 60,000 people, surrounded by oil refineries, and it's on the western shore of Sabine Lake on the upper Texas coast. And on the east shore of the same lake is the state of Louisiana. So that's how close we are out of Texas. And because of that, there's a large Cajun influence in my hometown. A lot of people from Southwest Louisiana moved to Texas to work in the oil fields and the oil refineries. So, and I went to high school at Thomas Jefferson, graduated in 1975. It's a school that had a few famous people in it that went there, Janis Joplin being one of them, and Jimmy Johnson, the football coach for the Cowboys and for the University of Miami. He's now a sports commentator on television on NFL. And also the artist, the pop artist, Robert Rauschenberg is also went to Thomas Jefferson High School.
Sorry, let's show a couple of those pictures of Kathy from her past. Can we do that? Oh my.
Oh yeah.
Who
Well,
is
this
this
proves
lady
that
on the left?
I didn't have gray hair all my life.
So you were involved in athletics and in the band at high school. Tell us about that.
Well, in junior high and high school, I was involved in music. The photo you see down there at the bottom is the junior high school jazz band, and I am to the right of the band director's shoulder, directly to the right. I played alto saxophone, and I started playing that in 5th grade and played all the way through my sophomore year of college, mainly marching band, but also jazz band and symphonic band. Didn't really do athletics until college, which is what that photo in the upper right is. That's a discus. I was throwing the discus at a meet at Texas A&M. And then the big photo of me with the long, almost red hair is my sophomore high school photo, yearbook photo. You know, where all the girls in the 70s, they all wore their hair the same way, which that is it, the middle part with long hair.
So Kathy, tell us a little bit about your family.
Well, like I said, it's a Cajun background. The name Portie, if you go to Louisiana, is pronounced Portier. And my father grew up in Port Arthur, was a welder at the refinery. My mother actually was from Fort Worth and moved down to Southeast Texas and stayed with her sister and married, met him, and they married. I do have an older brother who still lives in the area. He works at one of the oil refineries as a machinist, and that's about it. He has he has 3 sons and a daughter, and they all, 3 of them live in Texas. The other one lives in Florida. And so we're kind of spread out now, and there's not much left to the family. So,
interesting. So after high school, you talked a little bit about you kind of wanted to take some time, but that didn't happen. And so tell us what happened after you got out of high school, Kathy.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Some people might, remember this back in the 70s. You always wanted to take that year off from school and go hiking, backpacking in Europe. That was the big thing. So I wanted to do something along those lines. Didn't really know what I wanted to major in because I liked way too many things. And but I didn't go off. I went straight to school, mainly because my father had retired, and the only way that we could pay for school was the fact that I was going to be able to get Social Security benefits because he was retired and I was still under the age of 20. So, the dreams were put on hold about traveling, and went to school, and then ended up changing my major like a dozen times, it seems like. And it took about a dozen years to finish my bachelor's degree because of stopping and going to work and everything. So
Kathy, what school did you go to?
I went to Lamar University, which is in Beaumont, Texas, and it is in the state university system. It is public college. It's mainly an engineering school, but I entered school as a communication journalism major, which is what I ended up with in a circuitous route, but also majored briefly in history and physical education and English and general studies. And I could go on and on.
But in the end, you got your undergraduate degree
In communication, a Bachelor of Science degree in communication. And I, the last, I say 10 of those 12 years, I actually worked at the university full time as the Assistant Sports Information Director, which is a public relations job for the athletic department. And so I was only able to take classes on a very short, very seldom intermittent basis. And I had about 36 hours to complete at that point. And there were a lot of times I ended up having to drop classes because of work was interfering with that. And but I did manage to get that degree. It was much easier and quicker to get my master's. So
let me understand. You started college and then you sort of dropped out of the college thing and worked for a while, and then
yes,
ultimately came back and got your undergraduate degree. Does that
correct.
understand?
Well, I actually was still working when I got my undergraduate degree. I was still working in that job.
Uh-huh.
Once I got the degree, I actually left that job and worked for a couple of years at the Beaumont Enterprise newspaper as a sports copy editor and page designer. So that was my first real job in the newspaper industry.
Interesting. So then you decided you needed to go back and get your master's degree.
Correct.
And where
And
did you do your work in your master's?
well, I was going to go to Humboldt State. That's where I was accepted, and was working was going to get my master's in film. And I moved to Eureka, and they doubled the out-of-state tuition on me during my move. So it was just an expense I couldn't handle at the time. So I ended up going back to Texas and got my master's at at Lamar University in visual arts with a focus on photography.
Tell us about this photography thing. What do you study? I mean, I get out my phone and I take a picture. I'm sure it's quite a bit more complicated.
Well, this was in the early 90s, so you didn't get your phone out to take pictures back then. This was film. And so what we would do, it was mainly black and white photography. We learned how to, take photos, composition, develop our own film, print our own pictures, and then we would have exhibitions in the art department, art gallery, and so it was more of a fine art photography as opposed to a journalism or a communication degree.
Tori, show us some of those pictures that Kathy did, and maybe she can talk about those as part of her master's work.
Sure. Well, the one on the one on the left and the color photo are both taken during a photo workshop that I went on while I was working on my master's in San Miguel de Allende in Mexico. Our professor, who's a fairly well-known photographer in his own right, Keith Carter, would go down there every year to do photos. And he decided to bring the class down. So we all went down for a week in March, which was interesting because I don't know how many people have been to a St. Patrick's Day parade in Mexico before, but we did. And then the one in the lower right is a photo. It's actually a self-portrait, and it's taken at the beach in High Island, which is halfway between Galveston and Port Arthur, after a hurricane.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So now you have your master's in
Mm-hmm.
photography, and this lure of California seems to keep looming up in your life.
Well, it does.
Tell us about your finally, here come Kathy to California. Tell us about that.
Well, you'd have to go all the way back to when I was 6 years old, and my family would go on these travel trailer vacations. And our very first one was to California in a little Scotty trailer, which only one person can stand up in at a time. There were 4 of us, but we traveled from Port Arthur and went all through California. And I just fell in love with the state at that point. And I even have my first photos taken with my little Brownie Instamatic. I still have the negatives on those. So I guess my chore in life was to try to find a way to get back to California one way or the other. School didn't work because of the expense. So once I got my master's degree, I thought, it would be great to teach college, teach photography. And California has so many colleges, tons and tons of community colleges, little colleges, that I thought, there might be a chance. So I, and at the same time, I went through the Directors Guild of America program where they interview people for internships. And I made it to the final round of interviews, but did not get selected. And then the college teaching didn't really pan out because I learned very quickly that if you're an art teacher in college, you grab hold and never let go of that job, because it gives you the chance to create art and get paid at the same time. So I ended up in Los Angeles in '95 and needed to find work. So I guess the Hollywood Reporter is pretty good. It has a lot of ads. So I applied for a job at a small international television distribution company. It was called Unipix International, which was, the larger company was Unipix Entertainment. They did straight to video movies as well as reality and documentary programming. And I got that job in an interesting way. It was just the receptionist job. I was overqualified, but ended up being their creative services manager after about a year, designing their one sheets and they're doing their newsletters and those publications, things like that. I did that for about 6.5, 7 years.
My understanding is that company went bankrupt. Is there some correlation between your involvement with them and that bankruptcy?
Probably, no. I had nothing to do with money. Maybe they wouldn't have gone bankrupt if I had had something to do with how they spent their money, but I didn't. But they did go bankrupt. And so I ended up still doing the same type of work freelance for about a year while I was trying to find the same type of work at other places. I interviewed at Columbia TriStar and a couple of other places. But it was a time this is the early 2000s that the marketing departments at the studios and in the entertainment industry were getting cut back. So for example, the Columbia TriStar job, there were like 300 to 400 applicants, and they narrowed it down to 7 of us. And again, this seems to be a story of my life. I was a finalist and didn't get picked.
So now Big Bear comes into sight. Tell us about that, how that happened.
Yeah, well, I had like I said, I'd worked in the newspaper before, both in college part-time at a little weekly, and then full-time at the daily newspaper for a couple of years. And you know, the freelance work was not very lucrative. I could still do that work, and I could do it from anywhere. And I thought, well, why don't I start looking for, you know, maybe I'll go back to the newspaper business. And so I started putting in my application to a variety of places. And the Grizzly was looking for both a reporter and a page designer at the time. And I ended up getting hired on as a part-time reporter, not even full-time. And but I was still able to do my freelance work from Big Bear, which helped pay you know, my living wages until I became full-time at the Grizzly.
Kathy, I'm curious, I would assume, and maybe this is an incorrect assumption, that as an aspiring reporter, you'd want to go to work for some big gigantic newspaper like the New York Times, or was that on your agenda at all, or did you want to work for a smaller newspaper?
No, it really wasn't, because maybe if when I was younger, you know, a little bit more ambitious. By this point, you know, the thought was that I would at least do the work, you know, with the thought that maybe something else will come along, or I'll think about something else. But, you know, at this stage of my life, it's not easy to move to a new job and to a new career. I hate to say it, but I think there is ageism in job, you know, in job searches, and I'm at that age where they probably don't want to take, you know, invest in me as an employee for 2 or 3 years.
Sure. So you come to Big Bear, start part-time, and then pretty quickly moved up to a more responsible position, right?
Right. You know, I don't remember ever working completely part-time there. That's what they hired me to do. But I started in March of 2003, and I would say within a couple of months, I was working full time. About the same time that one of the reporters left, so they were able to, you know, give me more hours, and so it just went from there.
So the rest is kind of history. Tell us,
Yeah.
let's talk about your life today with the Grizzly, and then we'll talk about some other parts of your life. You're the
Okay.
senior editor. Tell me, how's that work? Tell me how this
Well,
whole thing is organized.
yeah. Well, you know, there's only 4 of us right now in the office. So the senior editor's job, basically what I do is work, and I lay out pages, you know, and design pages. I have my own beats, you know, sports, entertainment, environment are the subjects that I normally work on. And but I also will, you know, manage, I guess you could say, manage the freelance writers that we have. We have 3 right now. And so I will contact them and make assignments. You know, there's the publisher still does a lot of writing now because there's so few of us. And so she has her own beats to cover. And then we have an advertising person and a production person who helps with the designing the ads and preparing the pages for print.
And the Grizzly is owned by whom? Who are they?
It is a family corporation, the Brim Communications, and they're headquartered in the San Diego area. They own a lot of weeklies in California, Arizona, and Nevada and Utah. I think the only daily they own is the Auburn Daily Journal. The Big Bear Grizzly is part of what they call the High Desert Cluster, and that includes the Yucca Valley High Desert Star, the 29 Palms Desert Trail, the Lake Arrowhead Mountain News, and there's an entertainment magazine in Palm Springs called the Palm Springs Entertainer. And so all of those publications that are with those different areas, they print their papers down in Yucca Valley. That's where the printer is.
So do they pretty much leave you alone to
Yes.
do what you think is best, or?
Yes, the day-to-day operations and the content is left up to each community because they are community papers. So they don't really have a hands-on approach in that respect. You know, I think they're more hands-on on the financial aspect, but content and those kind of decisions, like when Judy Bowers decided to start the Big Bear Now magazine, that was purely a Big Bear Grizzly decision, not something that was directed from Brim.
And the newspaper is a business. They need to cover their expenses and stuff. Can you talk a little bit about, does that come from advertising, from subscriptions? How's that whole thing work?
It's primarily advertising. Subscriptions do play an important part of that as well, because, you know, you need to have a good subscription base to attract advertisers as well. But yes, it is the format, the platform for newspapers has been forever, you know, doing advertising revenue to help pay the expenses of the paper and the subscriptions that go along with it.
So Kathy, go ahead.
I was going to say we have a variety of different subscriptions. You know, the magazine I just mentioned is free. The newspaper is both in print and there's an e-edition, so you can subscribe to one or the other. Or if you subscribe to the print version, you also get the subscription to the e-edition. So there's a variety of ways, you know, formats that as time goes on, you try to be able to let people have access to. So.
Do you think the Grizzly will ever stop printing a hard copy, so to speak, and go to an e-thing, or what's your thought?
You know, that's a good question, and it's not an easy question to answer because, you know, we've seen dailies, major dailies, go to digital only. I think community papers like the Grizzly, for the small town community paper, where they focus only on basically on stories that are in the community. There's a different challenge there as opposed to the big majors. The majors, you know, you can get that news anywhere. So they have to attract the younger readers by going digital. And for us, there is still a very large base of people who do not like going digital. They want the feel of that newspaper in their hand. And sure. As long as that happens, as long as those subscriptions stay, I would say the paper as a print version is going to stay as well.
Interesting. So it seems like everywhere I turn, there you are with your camera and your notepad, but I know you do have a little bit of another life.
Yeah, kind of.
One of the things I want to talk about is your involvement with Peak to Peak. Can you, number one, maybe, I think most people that are with us know what Peak to Peak is, but maybe give us a 1 minute what Peak to Peak is about.
Okay. Well, it's a fundraiser, and it's a fundraiser for the U.S. Adaptive Recreation Center. And it's their major fundraiser. They have several fundraisers, but it's one of their top fundraisers every year. And what they decided to do about 26 years ago is to host a 5-day bicycle ride from Big Bear to Mammoth. And people who do the ride, they have to raise a minimum amount of money to participate. And that money goes to help pay for like scholarships and money for the program, which is at Bear Mountain.
How many miles is that, Kathy?
335.
335.
Yep. And you basically go from, the first day is Big Bear to Barstow, then you go Barstow to Ridgecrest, and then Ridgecrest to Diaz Lake near Lone Pine. And then the next day is to Bishop and then to Mammoth. So the middle, you know, you're averaging about 60 miles a day, but you're really going a lot more on a couple of those days than,
sure.
I think the Ridgecrest, the Barstow to Ridgecrest is almost 90 miles. And the Ridgecrest to Diaz Lake is about 79 miles.
And in case you don't know, Kathy has done this insanity 11 times.
Yeah.
Yay for you.
Yeah.
Show us a couple of those pictures, Tori, would you please? So tell us about these, Kathy.
Okay. Well, the one of me riding the bicycle on the left is taken the first year that I rode, which was their 15th. Don't ask me what year that was. I don't remember. And it was, the reason I rode it mainly was because of work. I said, you know, it's their 15th anniversary. What better way to cover the event than to actually experience it and do it?
Good
So
for
that
you.
was the thought behind doing the ride. And, you know, I bought an old bicycle from Derek Herman at Bear Valley Bikes, and he fixed it up for me. And then Ted DeVito helped train me a little bit to get me in shape, and we went from there. So.
And who are these three ladies that you're with, or two ladies?
Okay, well, that's during the 20th ride, and that's in Diaz Lake, where you camp out every night in a tent. So on the left is Sarah Roselle, who is works for U.S. Adaptive Recreation Center. She organizes this event every year. Sally Martin, who used to live in Big Bear, is in the middle, and then of course me on the right. And we have little fake tattoos that sort of promote the event, the 20th annual event. So.
Cool. So Kathy, in addition to that craziness, you do have some other hobbies that you like?
I do. I play golf and I go hiking. You know, I love going to see the movies, but I like actually going to the movies, not seeing a movie on TV. Unfortunately, we can't do that right now. So that's the other thing is I love going to the theater, and haven't done that as much as I used to a long time. When I lived in LA, I had season tickets to the Amundsen, so I really enjoyed going then, and had them for the first couple of years I lived up here after that. But yeah, that's about it. You know, then.
Kathy, we talked a little bit about what the future holds for you, and what you said to me is you've sort of found your niche in terms of work and lifestyle. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, you know, I'm a firm believer that, you know, whatever happens, happens. So, you know, I have all these, you know, you have all these ideas and thoughts about what you want to do. And then I've always thought, you know, whatever happens, happens. So, you know, this is what my life has led me to. So, and I'm really fine with that. You know, I had people who asked me one time, why did you move to California? Why did you know, all by yourself in 1995 without a job? And I go, well, I knew I'd find a job eventually. You know, I'm not worried about that. Things kind of work themselves out in the end. And so I like what I'm doing. I like, you know, obviously I like where I live, because instead of the couple of years I thought I would be here before I moved on, I've been here since 2003. What is that? 17 years now, 18 years. And you know, I am thinking about what the next chapter is going to be, because I'm at that point where I'll be retiring in a couple of years. And, you know, I've started looking into maybe setting up my own freelance photography business, and, you know, as a supplemental income, and then doing a lot of traveling. So.
You still play the sax?
You know, I could if I had one. I have the mouthpiece, but I don't have the saxophone. And I was a fairly good saxophone player. I was first chair, but I am not. I cannot improvise. I need a sheet of music in front of me. So as long as there's a sheet of music in front of me, I could play it. So.
Would that still be fun for you, or?
It would. And you know, I also played piano, but I wasn't very good at that. But saxophone, yeah, I think I could pick that up with no problem.
Somebody has an old saxophone laying around somewhere, you might drag it out and give it to Kathy. And
yeah, an alto or a tenor. I can't play the baritone. I don't have the lungs for that.
Well, Kathy, we appreciate what you've done for this community. I think everywhere I turn, there you are, and it's been fun. There's a bunch of folks out there. Let's see if some of them have some questions or some thoughts they'd like to share with you. Tori,
Okay.
what do you got? Al Weiner.
Oh.
Al has a question or a thought.
Oh,
Al. Can we unmute Al?
We're
Tori?
working on it. Hey, Grandpa, so there's going to be a little button that says unmute, and you got to click on that. It'll be on your computer. There we go.
There you go.
No, your grandpa can't do it on his own. Kathy, you are just absolutely remarkable the way you cover all of the athletic events, not just the high school. but I've always wondered, do you have a favorite sport that you cover?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I, I'm from Texas, so the normal answer would be football, right? It's not my favorite sport to cover, although I enjoy it. I I played soccer in a soccer league as an adult. We didn't have it when I was in college, so I love that sport. I love covering that sport. And then, you know, other than that, baseball is another favorite sport. It's a challenging sport to cover photography wise. That and softball. And so I like the ones that give me a challenge because it, you know, try to find a way to 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 illustrate what the game is all about. So I would say those were my favorite. Would be the challenging ones. So.
Good. Let's see. Are there some other folks that have some questions, or we have some chat thoughts?
Yes, we have a question from Beth. She asked, what photographer do you admire most? And can you describe which of your own photographs you are most proud of and fond of, and why?
Ah, good. That's a good question. You tried to stump me on that. I would say one of my favorite photographers of all time, other than my professor, who as I said, is a professional photographer, and you should look him up. His name is Keith Carter. Would be Henri Cartier-Bresson, a French photographer who kind of was the father of documentary photography, street photography. Loved his work, and you know, if I had a chance to see some of his exhibitions, I would love to. I have not, but I have a couple of his books. I also really enjoy Robert Frank. His book, The Americans, is an astounding, again, in that same vein of documentary, street photography type thing. And he was along the same lines of, I guess he was the photographer that Jack Kerouac was the writer for. You know, the same kind of generation, the Beat generation.
Cool.
And then what was the other question? My favorite photograph that I took? Well, you know, I one of my favorite subjects was, you know, we had to do a variety of different things. My master's thesis was on landscape photography in the Four Corners region, and which I enjoyed. But I think my favorite was doing black and white portraits, imitating works of art. And I think that was my favorite subject to do. You know, one of my favorite, and I'm not a portrait photographer by any means, but one of my most successful photographs I had won an honorable mention at an LA gallery downtown, was a portrait of a fellow photographer student who was also a firefighter. And it's just a very simple portrait, black and white portrait, called Jimmy. And I used a technique where I developed the print through tissue paper, which gave it this really texture. And I have it hanging up on the wall in my house. So that's, I think, my favorite photo.
Cool. Tori, we got some other stuff there?
Yes, Brian Adam asked, what do you enjoy about covering the arts here in Big Bear? And have you ever been involved in a theater production? And if so, tell us about it.
Well, I got chosen twice to be in A Christmas Carol Askew by no fault of my own, Brian Adams. You know, the very first theater production I ever did was in elementary school. And the choir would do a spring variety concert. And I was in choir as well as band at that point. And we did the Roaring Twenties. And so we sang all these songs from the Roaring Twenties. So that was the very first thing I did. I didn't really participate in theater in high school because I was in music, and that took up a lot of my time. But I would say what I enjoy the most about covering Big Bear arts and entertainment, and the high school performing arts in particular, is the talent and the dedication that I witness when I see all that, and that is what keeps me going and wanting to continue to cover them.
Cool. I saw a question from Margot about what is Peak to Peak going to happen this year? Have you heard anything?
I have heard things. In fact, I just spoke with Sarah Roselle today, and they're hoping to have it. They have already set up their signups, so you can actually sign up on their firstgiving.com and start raising money. They're working on plans to do the social distancing and figure out how to feed the crew, because they feed you and they sag all your equipment. So all you have to do is ride a bicycle. And if it doesn't work out, they are going to do a virtual peak to peak, so that they haven't worked that out completely, but you would log in your miles on Strava or some other app and go your 335 miles to help raise money for USART. So they're working on a couple of ideas, and they will fine tune that as they go along.
Sure. Interesting.
Yeah.
What
So
else
it'll
we
be their 26, and they've done it, 26 years.
Sure.
Now.
Interesting. What else you got, Tori?
Beth asked, do you cook Cajun? And if so, what is your specialty? And if not, why not?
Yeah. Well, good question again. Yes, I can cook Cajun. I have my mother's recipes, and yes, and I would say probably I love cooking the shrimp gumbo, and then and of course shrimp is the thing. So, and shrimp jambalaya. Those are the two things I can, and shrimp Creole as well. Those are the three recipes that I cook on occasion. I don't cook it as often as I would like, because it really needs Gulf shrimp, and California shrimp is not quite the same thing. But I love shrimp. That was our big Sunday dinner. Was shrimp. It was fried shrimp, not fried chicken. And my dad would go to the shrimp boats down at the docks and buy the shrimp fresh off the boat. So.
Brian wants to know what time dinner is.
Well, come on, shrimp etouffee, yeah. Tonight's dinner is going to be vegetarian sausage and potatoes. So come on over.
Any other things there, Tori?
Doesn't look like it unless anyone's raising their hand.
Anybody else have some questions or thoughts for Kathy? Well, thank you all for being with us. Kathy, it's been a pleasure to learn more about you. Next week, June 22nd, 5:30, that's Monday. My guest will be Wade Reeser. Some of you know Wade. Wade is a Big Bear boy and is now the Chief Operating Officer for Big Bear Mountain Resorts, which means in the end, he's responsible for Summit, for Bear Mountain, and for the golf course. And Wade has a most interesting story to tell. So I hope you'll spread the word and join us next Monday, 5:30, for Let Me Introduce You to Wade Reeser. Thanks for being here, my friends. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks, Kathy, for your time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Did you write?